What's happening on it? Hello. Sorry about that. Anyway, well, I hope you liked my last video where I was talking about gnosis, hypnosis, and analysis. And in this video, I want to talk about uh, how does it manifest more specifically. And I just want to say something about the nature of masculinity and femininity in the respect of this idea of programming, suggestibility, and things like that. Now, the first thing I want to say is that the moment there is an intent in consciousness, that is a masculine movement, intent. It can be shown as a pillar or a current, the stream, electricity, right? And so that is programming. Intent is programming. It is writing a code of the reality. It is a writer. That is the nature of the first intent, that it's there. Now, at the root, as I was saying, there's this natural default state of consciousness, which is, again, you can call it any way you want, but there is that natural state of consciousness where there's movement and no movement, and a state of infinity, if you will, right? And in that case, there's this great womb, which is void, that can create anything. And then there's the spark, which basically makes the choice of what is being created. And that void has all the possible permutations of the reality. And that spark highlights one or the other. And so that's pretty much the nature of, at the essence. But whenever that motion happens, that intent, say like, hey, I'm going to create like a show of lights, that is masculine. Okay, that is masculine. And in that case, the feminine is basically the substrate, the energy out of which everything unfolds. Again, it's just like a you can call it a womb or whatever. But the moral of the story here, that intent is programming, okay, and then allowance or suggestibility is like rendering that intent. And so, as you can see, in this moment, we have intent, which could be based on harmony or duality. I have to say something about this duality thing in this particular context, that the word diablo in Spanish, you have di, which really means two or double, and hablo is to speak. And what does it mean? It means like a double speak. It means that it is a lie. It is a lie. Or in this particular case, it is a bad programming or bad code, or a code that is does not lead to harmony, which is that original flux that everybody is really looking for, that default state. So there you can see there's two types of intents, and therefore there's two types of masculine, the corrupt masculine and the correct masculine. This is why, like, sometimes people call, divine masculine, and then they just throw this word around. It's like, oh, it's divine masculine, and they apply it onto something that is not divine masculine, because divine masculine has a very specific meaning, and it means the intent or the programming of the reality that is based on holistic and harmonic way. It is a beautiful code. Whoever wrote the code of Bitcoin was a real deal. And many other codes that are being infused into this reality, they are either corrupt code or correct code. Okay, either pushing this reality of the matrix or pushing the real world. People call it like 3D, 5D, but I don't know if that's a good term to use, because the 3D, it's still a physical reality, even though your consciousness may be in 5D. So I don't know, that can be confusing to people. It doesn't mean that you leave the physical reality to be in the 5D. It means that your consciousness, your psyche, or your soul is functioning at the fifth density level, and your body is in a third density still. So that's just like that's where everything is organized in a quite different way, and in an elegant way, and that's why such things as holistic societies and communities are being born from this type of coding of the reality. So okay, and it would be nice that just as physics is being respected, it would be nice that metaphysics would be respected equally, because really what they're talking about in the quantum physics is actually metaphysics, all the same theories and concepts. It's just another word. Quantum physics, metaphysics is another word to describe the phenomena that is may not be seen to the naked eye, but its results can be seen. Okay, so if we agree that the definition of masculine is that pen, that's why pen, penis, intent, it's all about writing the code. And that if we agree that there are two types, it's either going to be correct or the corrupt, then, as I call it, there's obviously two types of men also at any point in time. And I have a little word for that, but maybe we'll get to this later. Okay, now, then we look on the other side and say, okay, what is allowing that to happen, right? Because intent must also be met with allowance. That's where the feminine comes in. The feminine has no other function but to allow something or deny something, open or close, right? Masculine, stream this type of code or that type of code. Feminine, open or close, right? These are the primordial functions of consciousness. How to give an example in real life? Well, this is how suggestibility works, right? If somebody is saying something and somebody is suggestible in believing something, it is creating that belief reality, right? And what carries the most suggestibility are children and women. They carry more of that feminine energy. Okay? This is why I say, and this is metaphysically true, that woman, and by definition of what woman means, not going and being like fucking sneaky and saying that, like, well, if you're a woman or a man, it doesn't matter. I only mean masculine or a feminine, No, you can't say that. It does matter whether you're a man or a woman. You can't say that. You understand? Because if you are a woman and then you are identifying yourself with the masculine energy in your soul, in your heart, you are, by definition, are not being yourself. Again, in a previous video or 2 videos before, I explained that that's not it doesn't apply on skills. That skills can be learned equally, because skill is your avatar, and your avatar, like, can learn things equally, whether it's a male or female, can learn things equally, because each avatar has the same capacities. But in the essence, I'm saying that it is not okay. It is not okay to cultivate masculine energy in your heart if you're a female. It's not okay. And the only reason you do that is because you are naively opened up to corrupt masculine, which created something that is of negative experience. And then the bad conclusion that you made was that I have to create my own masculine because I cannot trust the masculine itself. No, you cannot trust the corrupt masculine. That's the lesson. And the only thing that you got to do is open up to the correct masculine. And that is all on the energy, on the soul level, before the reality is being created. Okay? And yeah, and there's just no other way that you can play with this. And that's where the power comes from. The power is not what's been programmed. This is what I'm trying to communicate here, because in order to shape the reality, all you got to do is convince of it how it works. Convince the children and women that that's how it works, because they're the easiest and most suggestible, right? But through the experience, a woman can become selective to what she's opening and to what she's closing. And that happens through a feminine alchemy, through the devotion. She ends up having negative feelings. Instead of using analysis and creating the policies of how she's going to have to be now in the world to not have that again, and create the ego, which is usually when a woman ends up carrying a masculine essence, that's ego, because that's not who she is. Walking around with that ego, not able to feel her genuine feelings, and suffering. But the correct way is all these negative emotions that ended up being felt, like I always say, the point in the circle. You surrender and you dissolve them in compassion. In the true, the highest power of woman is compassion, or right, yes, exactly. The highest power of woman is compassion. It is that stillness that nullifies all the spells. And symbolically, I can equate that to a shield. Okay. And so now, when it's being dealt with those negative emotions in such way, there is a certain type of sensitivity to energies that a woman becomes aware of. Now, that sensitivity makes a woman choose what to open to and what to believe and what reality is, harmonious and is good and leads to the original flux of enjoyment, and what isn't. And that is the strength of the feminine intuition. And she isn't closing to bullshit. She's actually opening up to the stillness and silence, and where bullshit has no power. So she uses compassion, the silence, to silence the bullshit spells. But when there is a programming that is of good nature, which allows her to experience reality in a harmonious and a playful way, she opens up to that selectively. And that is the highest wisdom of the feminine. That's where the focus is supposed to be, and that is the feminine the feminine alchemy, as I call it. Okay, because if a woman is going to take the masculine essence, it's going to be ego, and I'm saying something which is like, people are so freaking sensitive about. I don't know why. Why can't they just say that things are the way they are, and if you try to change them, they're not going to be the way they are, and therefore corrupt. Including this thing that if a man is carrying a feminine energy, and so then the culture is like, oh yeah, we're trying to be accepting or whatever, and so that's okay if you want to be feminine. If you're a male, it's okay. No, it's not fucking okay. It's wrong. It's a fucking abomination. That's what it is. Again, I just want to reiterate that the good thing about this role-playing part, where you are learning skills, right? That's the good part, because if a woman can learn the skills that meant to be or class to be as a masculine, that's all right. That's not like she doesn't have to lose her feminine essence and become masculine to do a skill that is culturally was seen as a masculine skill. See what I'm trying to say? So that's the good part, because then we all can share, the skills that are there. I mean, I don't see any downside in that, but I do see a huge downside in corrupting your essence of what you're supposed to be playing in your soul, who you are in your soul. It's like this, because there's this dharma or there's karma. There's dharma, and that is the way of things that are flowing naturally when you put attention on where your attention must be put. And there's the way of things that just happens and it's perfect already. It's only when you try to intervene with what's happening already and say like, I want to make a change because I ended up having a negative feeling. That's when you create a branch, what they call like a dead end branch. And you engage into bad programming or allowing a bad code to come into the reality. And so this is where this word obedience comes from, because obedience, it's not inherently a bad word, or like perhaps it's been tried to make it be that like, don't obey. Yes, you do not obey the bad code. You do not obey the matrix. You do not obey the men who write shitty code. You don't obey the demon cocks. You know what I'm trying to say? That's the wisdom, and you close off to that bullshit. But by definition, you must be open to something that is of value, of real value. You can't just be closed, because then there's no life. It's not flowing. You got to open to something. And therefore, there's this word obedience. You obey to something that is of the programming of the nature that creates the reality in a harmonious way. And so then, as feminine is being led into the world that she's dreaming of, right? Okay, now that's it. There's no arguments about this. I mean, anybody who understands physics can see how metaphysics works. You look at electromagnetics and you'll see how the electricity works and how magnetism works. And if you put the correct word of something, there's an open channel, closed channel, there's a current, and there's this type of current or that type of current. You see that in electromagneticity as well, and that's why you see that in consciousness as well. Why am I saying all this? Well, because you look at what's going on in this matrix world, and you see all these dysfunctions, and people running around like a headless chicken. If you tell them the truth, like what I'm saying now, where is the power in feminine and where is the power in masculine? That there is only corrupt masculine and a correct masculine. That there is only corrupt feminine or the correct feminine. To that level of simplicity. And that the reality is being created through the intent and allowance or obedience. Intent and obedience. Because if somebody is intending the harmonious world, but a feminine is open to believing bullshit and nonsense and in all this shit that's being programmed, then by definition she's not contributing, she's not being the womb to the reality that she desires herself. She's punishing herself by allowing the bullshit reality to be created. And in my experience, men who tend to be leaning towards ego or like this incorrect thing, I've noticed that some have capacity for self-correction, others do not. And if you're with a man who has the capacity for self-correction, then there's something to work with. But if you with a man who has no capacity for self-correcting, but actually double down on their bullshit, when they caught lying, cheating or whatever they do, because all of their reality is bullshit. They hypnotize you with bullshit stuff. And when they get caught, they still double down. They still try to create another fucking story to distract you from the fact that they're pieces of shit. If you see that's going on, you can, be confident that you're not going to make a mistake by creating a huge fucking closed off boundary to this motherfucker. You're not going to make a mistake by doing that. You can try it once, twice, 3 times, see what they do. But if you come across a man who did something wrong, let's say they lied or cheated or whatever, but when they're caught, they let their ego break down and they admit their mistake, then that's the man that has a capacity for self-correcting. And so I've noticed there are two types of men, because we don't come here to play the game. We're not perfect, but there's one that is progressing and growing, and another one is that degrading. And there seems to be those 2 directions. And to catch that man who's going on degrading downward spiral and to say, hey, where are you going? You got to go that way. It's almost impossible until they hit the rock bottom. You got to actually do whatever it takes for them to accelerate to hit the rock bottom, to see that all good women are going to be leaving this type of man, and therefore all wealth is going to disappear, and therefore all influence is going to disappear, and they're just going to be locked up somewhere, dealing with the existential crisis. And then, only then, they can spiral back towards the right path. Until they hit the rock bottom, they won't turn around. And you can try all sorts of things and they won't do it. Okay? So that's the direction of the... Once somebody takes that direction and gravity, and men usually, for example, like I made that video that some men are resilient and some men are stubborn. That man who's caught red-handed is double down on their bullshit. That's stubbornness. You see? But somebody who, for example, is carries the truth within himself and wants to create that type of reality, but it meets the resistance, but you don't give up on that dream, and that's the resilience. So you don't give up on the truth, right? And how do you know what the truth is? It's how it feels. It doesn't feel like a lie. The truth feels good. Lie is toxic. And another thing, that definition, we're talking about this intent and the structure and the programming, masculine. It's there only to sustain the meaning. The purpose is only there to sustain the meaning. It's what I'm trying to say by that is that every right action by a man or by masculine is of service to the feminine, meaning the feelings. And that's how you know what truth is. Sometimes people say, well, we don't know what truth is. The truth is whatever is the closest thing to love. Because at the beginning, the truth and love, they're not separate. But then when you enter this reality, poof, they're separate. But they can dance together. And when they're disconnected, when there's no truth, there's no love. And when there's no love, there's no truth. But they have the capacity to dance together with like these DNA spirals. And that dancing is what the harmony is. That dancing is what the whole point is. When they're separate, but together at the same time. And that's what truth is. But when somebody is trying to be one-sided and leaving out this big reality that the truth is necessary for the love to be sustainable, then that's why you keep on cycling, love is all we need, love is all we need. No, that's bad programming. Love cannot be sustained without the truth. The truth, and which is the right programming of the reality, is what is at the most value right now to the world. And the recognition that these intents do exist, and that these are intents must get a recognition by the suggestible mind, that this is so, that this is true, that this is real, and that is possible. And not only that is possible, that is the default way of being. So again, when I say that women have no choice but to choose what structure to obey, I really mean that. I don't just say that because of like I have an agenda, right? Because I like to be in control or whatever, which is what is the fear is all about. But like I said, the programming of the reality is a masculine act. The dreamer is a masculine act, but the dreamer cannot create a dream without the canvas. You see, that pen, that painter cannot do anything if there's no canvas. You know, or if the canvas is black, no matter what kind of colors you're gonna put in there, it's just not going to be visible if the canvas is white. Maybe that's not the best metaphor, but you see what I'm trying to say. Blocked, your dream is blocked. Um, so what do we learn from this? That there is such thing as a good code, and there is such thing as a bad code, and that there is such thing. Another word I use for it, is a hypnosis. That all the reality is created through hypnosis, if you will, or imagination, or whatever word you like to use. But there is a certain type of will of saying that is how reality is, and then a certain type of openness to it is saying yes, that's how reality is, and that's how reality is going to be. And now, I was speaking about this in a collective type of sense, right? And the reality that we see outside of us. But as they say, it is a reflection of what's inside of us. Which means that you know what it means. Okay? I just wanted to say how reality is created is all you gotta do is convince children and women of how it is, and if they believe it, then that's how it's going to be. Why do you think the first thing that what this corrupt masculine does is enslaves the innocence, which means women are children? And so, if you keep a woman believing that world is a nasty place, or a child, then you are basically fueling um, your, if you're a corrupt masculine, you're fueling yourself with that. You're gaining uh, like a domination over those energies in order to survive. But they're just a piece of shit. which is great news because people like me use shit for fertilizer and grow good stuff. So that's the destiny of all the shitheads. Peace. See you next one.